To beat Brock with Annihilape, things are straightforward. Geodude has Tackle, which can't inflict damage, and I can use Leer and Scratch to knock it out. Remember, in Generation 1, Focus Energy is glitched, so I can't increase my critical hit rate. Plus, I only use 2 Leers, so that if I get a critical hit, Annihilape won't deal significantly less damage. Because in Generation 1, crits bypass all stat changes, badge boosts, enemy stage modifiers, and player stage modifiers. Also, crits deal less damage at lower levels, so I really don't want to be getting them in this case, even with just -2 on the Geodude. Once it goes down, Annihilape levels up to 9, where I teach it Low Kick in the place of Counter. By the way, 2 moves which are very unique in Generation 1 as well. This level up also perfectly gives me 24 speed, ensuring that I move first against the Onix and I never accidentally attack into its Bide, because despite being a normal type move, it can inflict damage to ghost type Pokemon, only in Generation 1. It feels to me like this battle is the perfect illustration of so many weird Generation 1 quirks. Here's another one, the fact that Onix's Bind cannot deal damage to ghost type Pokemon, but it does waste my time, playing both its animation as well as printing text. Eventually, with Low Kick, a base 50 power move in Generation 1 with a 30% chance to flinch, I defeat Onix and earn myself the Boulder Badge. At this point, you might be a bit confused, and that's fair, I threw you right into things. So let's rewind a bit, all the way back to where this video should have started, because I have a lot to explain. Only 1 week remains before Halloween, and over it, I am going to be completing 7 Pokemon Yellow backport runs with themed Pokemon. Ghosts, pumpkins, monsters, aliens, and a special finale on October 31st. We're going to start things off with Annihilape, the ghostly evolution of Primeape introduced to the series in Generation 9. Since I first saw it, I knew I wanted to code it into Yellow version and do some runs with it. There's one small problem though, and to understand that we need to go through my rules. Only my starter in battle, no items in battle, no glitches, exploits, or save states, and no evasion boosting moves until level 100, unless Mimic is used to obtain them, and that's a Generation 1 specific caveat. These rules cover everything required for standard playthroughs with one of the original 151 Pokemon, but they don't cover backports. There are so many questions that need to be answered whenever I add a new Pokemon to the game. Should I backport the Dark, Steel, and Fairy types? Should enemy Magneton be Electric Steel types instead of Mono Electric? What moves should the backported Pokemon have? Should I add its signature move to the game, Rage Fist in this case? How should I assign the Pokemon's special stat? And is this sprite janky enough? As I do more and more backport playthroughs on the channel, I think I need good answers to these questions. And so I'm gonna derive them from a singular source, my personal Pokemon mission, to beat the main series games with every species. Put another way, I want to beat Pokemon Yellow with Annihilape. I'm not trying to beat a ROM hack of Pokemon Yellow with Annihilape. The goal is to change as little as possible with the game experience while adding a new Pokemon to solo run the game with. The important duality here is that Yellow needs to maintain its identity while still giving me the opportunity to add a new Pokemon to the game. And that Pokemon also needs to have the distinct features that make it different from all other Pokemon. So let's go through and answer the questions, and in doing so, we're going to get a sense for what my backporting rule set is. Number 1, should I backport to Dark, Steel, and Fairy types? Yes, because if I don't, I can't complete the game with Mono Dark, Steel, and Fairy type Pokemon unless I just arbitrarily assigned them a different typing, and that doesn't feel correct. This also means if I backport a Mon like Jirachi, I'm going to give it its full typing instead of omitting the Steel type, as you will have seen in one of my previous videos. Number 2, should enemy Magneton be Electric Steel type instead of Mono Electric? The answer here is really simple, no, because that would change the nature of how Yellow version plays. No changes are going to be made to enemy Pokemon or the gameplay experience. The only changes implemented will be specific to the Pokemon I'm running. This ensures there are as fair as possible comparisons between the original 151 Pokemon's runs and all of these backports. I'm really about data and collecting a lot of it and comparing it at the end of these runs. It wouldn't feel right if one Pokemon had an easier time because it could use Earthquake against an Electric Steel Magneton, whereas the other one was more disadvantaged with a Mono Electric type Magneton. I'm thinking specifically about a Pokemon like Gyarados, which when mimicking Earthquake does not quite have the damage ranges it needs to consistently knock out the champion's Magneton. Okay, next question, number 3. What moves should the backported Pokemon have? This one's a bit complicated, so let's go through the process of assigning moves to Annihilape to better understand how I'll be approaching this process going forward. The first question I have to answer with Annihilape is, should I backport Rage Fist into the game? In Generation 9, Primeape evolves into Annihilape after using Rage Fist 20 times in battling and then leveling up. So Rage Fist is a part of Annihilape's fundamental identity, much like how Truant is a part of Slacking's and Wonderguard is a part of Shedinja's. So because of that, I decided that it makes sense to backport Pokemon with their signature moves and or their ability if it's part of what gives them their core identity. So today, Rage Fist is being added to Pokemon Yellow just for my Annihilape. By the way, thanks to Snowy for all the programming that was required to pull this off. I couldn't have done it on my own. Now let's tackle, or I should say, scratch my way through Annihilape's move pool. The first thing I look at is the Pokemon's debut generation set, so Generation 9. Here it starts with Counter, Fling, Scratch, Leer, and Focus Energy. That gives us a straightforward starting set of Counter, Scratch, Leer, and Focus Energy, which are all moves from Generation 1. Then in order to fill in the level up moves, I first need to decide what levels the Pokemon should learn new moves at. There are two ways that I can determine this. Number one, I can just take all the levels from Generation 9, or number two, I can take the levels of moves from a relative in Generation 1 or a Generation 1 comparable Pokemon. In this case, there's a direct relative, which is Primeape, so I'm just going to take the levels that it learns moves at from Generation 1. From there, I'm going to attempt to blend the sets, so wherever a move is not capable of being backported because it exists in a future generation, like for example Cross Chop or Assurance, I'm going to have to make a Generation 1 equivalent, and I can take that from Primeape's set. I include all of the Generation 1 moves that Annihilape can learn on its set in the move pool, and of course we're going to additionally add Rage Fist at level 35. For TMs and HMs, it's pretty simple. I'm just going to take Primeape's move pool but add two moves, Fissure and Earthquake. I felt like Annihilape should have these, and it does learn Earthquake in Generation 9. The next thing we need to talk about are its stats. Annihilape has 110 HP, 115 attack, 80 defense, 90 speed, and then for special I had to determine if I should give it its higher special defense or its lower special attack. You can see here that I gave it its lower special attack, so 50, but why did I make that choice? Well, it's quite simple. If you look at both Mankey and Primeape's stats from Generation 1, you will see that they have their lower special attack stat as their special stat in Generation 1. Starting in Generation 2, their higher stat, which is the special defense, was invented. I felt giving Annihilape a higher special stat would be going against this trend, and that didn't feel fundamentally in the spirit of this evolutionary line. After all, both Mankey and Primeape in Generation 1 are supposed to be weaker to special moves, but hit really hard with physical ones. Okay, and then the final questions we have to see, are these sprites janky enough? So this is Annihilape's front sprite, which I'm actually quite proud of. I just traced over the official art for it, and I think it turned out quite well. The real question is though, did I capture the perfect jank with the back sprite, which you've already seen? And I truly think I have. It was actually quite challenging to make this because there aren't really back sprites in Generation 9, you just see the Pokemon from behind. Anyways, I hope I pulled it off at least decently well. After all, we are going to have to look at it for quite a while. Okay, so now I think it's time at long last to get into this playthrough. The early game is very straightforward. I skip all of the optional trainers in Viridian Forest, fighting only the mandatory bug catcher. Although I noticed that my speed stat was a little bit low, so I end up fighting the junior trainer inside of Brock's gym for a little bit more experience. And as you've seen before, this was a good choice because it gives me the outspeed on Brock's Onix, and Bide isn't a threat. The ghost typing is fantastic in the early game, as we've seen with Pokemon like Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar. Most of the enemy Pokemon only have normal type moves, and when they don't, they have Poison Sting, which is not very effective. The only nuisance that can happen here is, say, a Weedle poisoning me, which does happen on Route 3, forcing me to waste a little bit of time and use an antidote. It always feels strange to me whenever ghost type Pokemon get poisoned. I feel like they should be immune to this status, and it is my personal theory that that's why the developers gave the Ghastly line the poison type. But for future ghosts, it's unfortunately a little bit of a weird interaction. In the next section of the game, I do some optional training, like against this lass with her Jigglypuff. I figured this battle is quick because she has a normal type and I have low kick. I also fight the lass with Clefairy just inside of Mount Moon's entrance, and then the Super Nerd because he has good experience yields. This hiker is fast experience as well with his rock type Pokemon, and then I battle one more Rocket before the mandatory 2 trainers at the end of the cave. Of course, Dome Fossil, always Dome Fossil, and then I head into Cerulean City. This is where I have to make my first important choice. Do I want to fight the rival on Nugget Bridge, or am I going to fight Misty? Both of them have Pokemon with moves that can damage Annihilape. Misty's Staryu and Starmie both have water-type moves, and the rival has a Spearow with Peck, but outside of that, all of his other Pokemon only have normal-type moves, so I figured that he would be easier. And by this point, I have learned Karate Chop, which in Generation 1 is a normal-type move, not a fighting-type move, but it has a high critical hit chance. With Annihilape's base speed, this is always going to crit. Well, it's going to crit 255 times out of 256 times. And so it provides me a lot of extra damage at this point in the game, plus a consistent way to attack because low kick only has 90% accuracy. With the rival defeated, along Route 24 and 25, I keep tabs on my speed stat. Misty's Starmie has 56 speed, so if I can get to 57, then Annihilape will move first. By the time I reach Bill, I'm getting close, so I fight the Rocket outside of Cerulean City and then backtrack into Misty's gym to fight the Swimmer as well for additional experience. At level 23, unfortunately Annihilape has exactly 56 speed, so it's going to be tied with the Starmie. But I think my outrageously high attack stat with Brock's badge boost should be more than enough to manage Misty. I was quite confident going into this battle because I didn't even heal my Annihilape. Staryu's first, and Karate Chop with a guaranteed crit knocks it out in a single turn. Next is Starmie. Now we're speed tied. I outspeed on the first turn, getting a crit, doing more than half. Water Gun doesn't do very much damage to me, but then the Starmie outspeeds with Bubble Beam. Still, Annihilape has the health it needs to survive, hit with Karate Chop one more time, and with that, Misty is defeated. Annihilape really isn't having problems anywhere, and it's not going to have problems against Surge, because I was able to learn Dig after defeating the Rocket outside of Cerulean City. Things keep getting better for Annihilape. On the SSN, I pick up Rest, just for safety later into the playthrough, and then I grab Body Slam, a fantastic normal type move. For a lot of Pokemon, this is a move that either makes or breaks a playthrough. Like for example, Starmie would do much better if it could learn this. But with Annihilape, it's not really as clear because Karate Chop actually has a higher effective power when factoring in its current critical hit modifier, which is dynamic on my overlay. So right now, Karate Chop has 91 effective power against Body Slam's 85. I think for my second playthrough, I might skip this move just to save an optional battle and a little bit of time teaching the move. Having it right now though is safe, just in case I run out of PP or I need the chance for paralysis later on. I defeat the Gentleman, pick up the rare candy, and then completely crush the rival. Okay, roll silly music, time for Surge. And that's it, let's move on. The Wrapping Lass is up next, but Karate Chop one-hits all of her Pokemon. Then inside of the cave, I have to face the Pokemaniac that has a Slowpoke with Confusion. This is technically super effective, but once again, this doesn't matter because Karate Chop is doing enough damage to 2-hit. The second Pokemaniac is a little bit more complicated. I thought it was going to take 3 hits to knock out, but instead of Karate Chop, I can use Dig for a little bit more oomph, and this gets the job done in only 2 turns. Dig continues being useful against the Status Condition Junior Trainer, and Low Kick, of course, is fantastic for the self-destructing Hiker. Actually, since I'm a Ghost type, if he uses self-destruct, he will just detonate his Pokemon for nothing, giving me a free knockout. I should have anticipated this and not used Dig against his Graveler, but he still blew up on the turn I was underground. So either way, it's still a 1-turn knockout for me. I clear the final Junior Trainer, and I just want to say, Annihilape crushed all of those trainers. Typically, at least one of them is somewhat difficult for whatever solo Pokemon you have, but not today. Through Lavender Town, I pick up the TM for Swift, which Annihilape can learn. My thought process around picking this up was that I'll save it for later for a trainer like Sabrina, who likes to use moves that lower your accuracy. In Celadon City, the hideout is an optional area in my playthroughs because I allow myself to use the Marowak skip with the Pokédoll. I'm going in here just to collect some items that I can sell for more vitamins, as well as one final rare candy. Doing this allows me to buy 4 protein, increasing Annihilape's attack stat. I also picked up the TM for Rock Slide on the top floor, and here's where I want to draw your attention to Karate Chop. Its effective power is only improving because as I level up, my critical hit modifier also increases. So if I want to teach this move to have super effective damage against flying type Pokemon, I'm going to have to put it in the place of Body Slam because I really don't want to give up Low Kick or Dig. Funny story, while we can learn Submission, that move is absolutely trash. I hate it so much. Recoil, 80 base power, and 80% accuracy. I guess at least it has 25 PP. In these solo challenges, and I have heard that in competitive, Low Kick tends to be the go-to move as fighting type coverage. And honestly, I think it makes sense why. It is the best fighting type move in Generation 1. 1. So with Rock Slide taught in the place of Body Slam, I am sure that I'm not going to need the powerful normal type move in the next run. Time for the rival in Pokemon Tower. He leads with a Fearow, so Rock Slide's immediately useful, knocking it out in one hit. Dig takes care of the Magnemite, Karate Chop misses against the Shelder. That's pretty frustrating, so that was a Generation 1 miss. As a result of this, I get confused, hitting myself a couple times, but that's the only thing that can go wrong here because the only damage dealing move the Shelder has is Tackle. Eventually Karate Chop hits twice and it goes down. Sandshrews next, Dig takes care of it, and Low Kick manages the final EV. Heading up the tower, the Chandler aren't issues because Dig one-shots all of the ghosts. And the exact same thing is true with Jesse and James, Poison-type Pokemon. Heading south on Cycling Road, I take a conservative approach fighting 4 trainers with good experience yields, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy. During the final of these battles, I level up to 35 and I have the chance to learn Rage Fist. So let's talk about how this move works. It's a ghost-type move with 50 base power, but unlike Rage in Generation 1, which locks you into using it, only raising your attack stat whenever your Pokemon is hit, Rage Fist's power increases by 50 every time it's damaged by the enemy's moves. This can happen a total of 6 times up to a base power of 350. But with the same type attack bonus, giving it a 50% damage boost, it's going to have an effective power right away of 75. I think that now it's finally time to give up Karate Chop because having good coverage is going to be far better. Also, it's worth noting in Generation 1, 2, and 3, all ghost type moves deal physical damage, which feels a little bit weird. It makes more sense with a move like Rage Fist, but I figure this is an important reminder because it is going to be using Annihilape's higher attack stat. And with that, we have a fantastic set of 4 physical moves: Rage Fist, Dig, Low Kick, and Rock Slide. Just Dig and Rock Slide together have neutral coverage against every Pokemon in the game, and with Rage Fist, I have the ability to go up against tough foes after I've taken hits in battle, dealing massive damage. Low Kick is also kind of nice. In some cases, it's a better form of Rock Slide because it has a 30% chance to flinch, like specifically against Cloyster, and there are many of them throughout playthroughs of Yellow. After finishing off the Safari Zone, I head back to Celadon City and face Erica. This is our first chance to see Rage Fist in battle. First turn, it does about a third to the Tangela, a little bit more. Then it heals itself with Mega Drain, but this damages Annihilape, increasing Rage Fist's effective power to 150. My next hit easily knocks out the Grass type from significantly more health. I can continue using the Ghost type move against Weepinbell, one-shotting, as well as against the Gloom. I choose to go to Silph next. I'm approaching level 40, currently level 36, almost 37, and I typically like to fight the rival around these levels. I think Annihilape could do it at a lower level than most Pokemon, just because the Ghost type is so fantastic defensively. Still, this is a first playthrough and I don't want to get walled in the late game by the champion. He's typically really hard in Yellow version, so I'm going to do some extra training. After defeating the Machoke guy, picking up the rare candy, as well as the TM for Earthquake, I then go up against these 6 trainers. The hope in this fight is that the Sandslash that leads will spam Poison Sting, stacking up the power of Rage Fist very quickly for the rest of the battle. That said, it doesn't, just choosing normal type moves, luckily not Sand Attack. Cloyster's next. I decide to go for Low Kick here because it has higher effective power and a chance to flinch. I don't get the secondary effect, but Cloyster hits with Aurora Beam. This is kind of good and kind of frustrating. It raises Rage Fist's effective power, but it also lowers my attack stat, which is unfortunate. That said, his 3 remaining Pokemon don't stack up well against Dig. Magneton goes down to a single hit because it takes super effective damage. The Kadabra is extremely physically frail, although I should point out here that Rage Fist will do no damage to Psychic type Pokemon because I've left that interaction unchanged. Finally, as Flareon, I go for Dig, and while it doesn't one-shot, I get hit by Fire Spin, it doesn't do enough damage, and that's that for the rival. Even with 1 stage lower attack, this was an easy fight, so I could definitely do this at a lower level. Giovanni is not noteworthy. In Koga's gym, I battle 1 optional Tamer for additional experience, and then I take on the Poison type specialist. This is one instance after completing my moveset where Rock Slide is the superior move. It has more effective power than all of my other choices against the Venonats, which are bug poison types. Against the Venomoth, things get a little bit more complicated because it's a dark ghost type, of course. It is Halloween month after all. Also, welcome new viewers. If you don't understand what's happening, that makes sense. Consider subscribing and getting a little bit more context as I release more videos. Venomoth does hit me with Psychic, which does massive damage, but Annihilape survives and is able to hit a second Rock Slide, finishing Koga. On my way to Cinnabar Island, I face Psych for additional experience. This is one of the best optional trainers to fight. I've said it so many times. Also, Annihilape is trying to learn new moves now, but it doesn't need anything else. Screech is just not useful at level 45. Okay, now it's time for some rapid fire gym leaders. Blaine is up first, and things don't start well against him. While Ninetales can't hit me with quick attack, Dig does not do enough damage to one-shot, and I take a flamethrower, which does almost half. Luckily, it's going to get easier. Once the Ninetales goes down and Rapidash comes in, it has less defenses and less HP, so I am able to one-shot it. But the Arcanine is by far his most defensive and bulky Pokemon. That said, Annihilape just gets a critical hit because it has a 17.58% chance to score these. So yeah, Arcanine goes down and Blaine isn't a problem. With his badge, I now have all of my badge boosts, giving me a 12.5% boost to all of my stats. Back in Saffron City, I pick up the TM for Mimic. This could be useful later on, so I don't want to skip it. Inside Sabrina's gym, I want to draw your attention to my Annihilape speed stat. It's 131. Sabrina's ace Alakazam has 133 speed, so I do some training up to level 47 to increase my speed. This gets me to exactly 133, so I end up using one rare candy to go up to level 48 over a damage rounding threshold to achieve the speed needed to move first against all of Sabrina's Pokemon. Dig is able to one-hit the Abra as well as the Kadabra, and then Alakazam comes in. I continue going for the ground type move because it deals the most damage, but it's not enough. Alakazam uses its best move, Psychic. It does so much damage. This is the most that Annihilape has taken throughout this entire playthrough. Still, it's not enough. I survive with 4 hit points. That gives Annihilape one more turn. Alakazam sets up Reflect while I'm underground, which is a little bit concerning. Luckily, I still do have enough damage, so Sabrina's finished. Okay, Giovanni is the only gym leader left. I think this one's going to be fairly straightforward because I already outspeed all of his Pokemon. The Dugtrio goes down to a single hit. By the way, in Generation 1, Earthquake does not hit you when you're underground using Dig, so that was never a threat. Next is Persian. I can use Low Kick to knock it out. I do miss once, which is annoying, but it can't damage me with Slash. It actually can't damage me at all because it only has normal type moves. Next is Nidoqueen. I can continue using Dig here, but I just barely don't have enough damage. Annihilape is only level 49. Giovanni, of course, is sponsored by Guard Spec, so I move on to the Nidoking, and it finally does damage to Annihilape with Earthquake, but it doesn't do very much, so that's that. I'm moving on to the Rhydon. I level up, I'm level 50, again sponsored by Guard Spec. I do half Tank and Earthquake, increasing Rage Fist's power, and then I use it to knock out the Rhydon. There's one more battle before the Elite Four. It's against the Rival, unless I choose to do optional training during Victory Road. For the Rival, I do want to draw your attention to something which you might be a bit confused about. Why isn't the Sandslash always choosing Poison Sting when Slash, Swift, and Fury Swipes are not going to do any damage? It would seem obvious that good AI would force it to use the move that is at least not very effective, but that isn't how it works. If there are no super effective moves, and there are only moves that are not very effective or that do no damage, then it will just randomize between all of the moves. This is a bit annoying in this case because I can't stack up Rage Fist's power right away like was the case in the previous battle. I'm also not going to be able to use Rage Fist against the Execute, which is second, exposing Annihilape to the chance of being paralyzed by Stun Spore. Luckily for me, it chooses to go for Leech Seed instead. Next is Cloyster. Low Kick just barely doesn't knock it out, but uses a potion, wasting his only turn. From there, his final 3 Pokemon are all one-hits. Okay, should I do any training in Victory Road? Well, I've been playing very conservatively up until this point in the playthrough, so I decided to do a little bit going up to level 52. I used one rare candy here to go over a damage rounding threshold to 53, and with that, I'm ready to start the Elite Four. Lorelei leads with Dugong, and you might be wondering why I've kept Dig on my moveset for so long instead of teaching Earthquake. I would save some time with the second of these moves because it only takes 1 turn to execute, but I wanted to have Dig so that I can dodge Dugong's first hit, and then on the second turn it prioritizes Rest against fighting type Pokemon, so it's going to heal, and that basically gives me a free knockout. Beyond that, Cloyster is next. I am exposed to Ice Beam here because I can't one-shot, however this isn't all bad because I'm able to stack up Rage Fist's power quite significantly. That said, the Slowbro that comes out next is a Psychic type, so I can't use this move against it. Also, since she has good AI, it's going to spam either Amnesia or Psychic, both moves which are very scary for Annihilape. Luckily for me, on turn 1 I can use Dig to dodge her attack, and then on turn 2 she has AI Modification 2, which forces her to set up with Amnesia. This means the Slowbro is getting very scary, and I think I luck out here a little bit with her choosing a Super Potion instead of attacking with Psychic. I finish it, move on to the Jinx, which is so frail that I thought I was going to one-hit, but I don't. I've never really drawn much attention to this, but the Jinx doesn't have a Psychic type move, so it's just going to be using things like Ice Punch. It could freeze me, but luckily it doesn't. Still, Annihilape is left with 15 hit points. points. But Rage Fist's effective power has increased to 450 before the Lapras. Is it enough? And the answer is yes. Okay, there's a hiker in the next room, he has fighting types and some rock types. You know, he doesn't matter, I'm a ghost type, this is simple. With him finished, I take some time doing some inventory management, first using my rare candies to bring Annihilape up to level 64. Then I teach it Earthquake in the place of Dig and face Agatha. This is in Generation 3, so I'm able to one-hit the ghosts using Earthquake, and I can use Rock Slide for the Golbat. This battle is a simple series of 5 one-hits. Okay, it's time for Lance. This one is a little bit sketchy. So the Gyarados is going to stack up my Rage Fist using Dragon Rage, but it only does it once because then I have enough power to knock it out. Now, I could have potentially wasted time here trying to get hit more with Earthquake, and I think that would have been the better strategy. Because while I am able to one-shot the 2 Dragonairs and make it to the Aerodactyl, it does have flying type moves which are super effective. Still, Annihilape is faster, I use Rage Fist, and luckily knock it out in 1 turn. Okay, but what about Dragonite? It does not go down to Rage Fist, so it gets a chance to attack, but it just misses with Thunder. Okay, this fight could have been more difficult if, say, it paralyzed me, but I'm able to squeeze through. That leaves only 1 trainer for my first playthrough, the Champion. Starting this fight off, I think it might be possible for Annihilape to get a no reset playthrough on its first attempt. This very rarely happens. Actually, I'm not sure if it has ever happened in Pokemon Yellow, so that just shows how good the Ghost type is defensively. Also, Rage Fist is very good, and Earthquake plus Rock Slide give neutral coverage for pretty much everything. His Sandslash hits with Earthquake just once before I knock it out, then against Alakazam I have to use Earthquake, but I have enough damage. Exeggutor is a little bit annoying because I have to use Rock Slide against it, and because of the type interactions here, it's prioritizing Hypnosis when I don't have a status condition. That said, it can also waste time when I'm asleep using Barrage and Stomp, which I'm not worried about. What I don't want to see is Leech Seed, and it does end up using it. That said, I was pretty confident that I would wake up and be able to knock it out. That is, if it doesn't consistently put me to sleep and slowly chip away with Leech Seed. I can't believe we have to watch this footage, but yes, the Exeggutor does, after all this time, slowly give Annihilape its first reset. It was at this time I decided to make a major change up on my moveset. I'm going to teach Rest in the place of Low Kick, so I'm not going to lose to the Exeggutor again, and then I put Thunderbolt in the place of Rage Fist. If we review the Champions team, what Pokemon do I really need to hit with Rage Fist? Well, not the Sandslash, I can take it out with 2 hits from Earthquake. The Alakazam is immune to Rage Fist as well as the Exeggutor, and then from there I'm going to want to use Earthquake on the Magneton and the Flareon, and Thunderbolt is good for the Cloyster. Of course, I held onto Rock Slide, so I have neutral damage against the Exeggutor. I still get hit by a Leech Seed, but it doesn't cause problems this time. Earthquake 1 hits the Magneton, Thunderbolt 1 hits the Cloyster even though my special attack stat is low, and of course Earthquake finishes his ace Flareon off. With that, Annihilape clocks in with a first playthrough time of 49 minutes and 20 seconds, with 1 unfortunate reset, 0 blackouts at level 66, with a game time of 3 hours and 11 minutes. Okay, let's get right into the second playthrough and see how I saved some time. First of all, I do want to note that I want this second playthrough to be no resets. Having even 1 will make this result disappointing regardless of what the real time is. In the early game, I still think on reflection on this route, I'm doing a little bit of overtraining in places like Mount Moon. I could probably just cut all of this and make it through the next section of the game with no problems. I arrive at Misty at a slightly lower level because I know I don't need to outspeed the Starmie to have success here. Still in my second run with a slightly more efficient route, I'm able to come out 1 minute and 12 seconds ahead after the second gym leader. From there, the time advantages continue. On the SS hand, I still pick up Rest. I'm going to need it for the Champion, like I demonstrated against Exeggutor previously. But after that, I skip Body Slam, saving 1 trainer and some teaching time. There are essentially no major battles from here for some time, and I leave the route mostly unaltered, exploring the hideout, grabbing the rare candy, and once again purchasing 4 protein. On Cycling Road, I battle the same trainers, and then I finish Erica. I'm now 2 minutes and 35 seconds ahead of my former pace. This is where I make my first major change to the route to save a lot of time. In Silph, I did a lot of optional training, and this just isn't necessary. After fighting the Machoke guy, I take on the mandatory Arbok rocket, and then I fight this guy with Hypno. I tend to like to avoid him, but he gives me the perfect amount of experience to level up to 37 before facing the rival. Then, because I'm not leaving experience on the table, I can use my rare candies to boost Annihilape up to level 43 over damage rounding thresholds. This only makes the rival battle slightly easier. The Sandslash is more likely to be a 2-hit, and the Cloyster is more likely to be a 2-hit as well, with a chance of it being a 1-hit, which isn't possible at the lower level. From there, Dig is just really great against his final 3 favorite Pokemon, which will remain to be the case throughout the rest of the playthrough. The main reason I'm using rare candies this early is just because Annihilape doesn't need to save them for later, so why wouldn't I just make the number of turns in battle less throughout the remainder of the run? That kind of advantage can only compound from here, yielding more benefits. By the time the rival's defeated, I'm now 3 minutes and 58 seconds ahead of my former pace. In Koga's gym, I skip the Tamer, and then, once I defeat the Venomoth, which still is not a threat, I am now 4 minutes and 15 seconds ahead of my former time. South of Palatown, I make a small planning mistake. I fight Psych, which is not important for the experience of the rest of the run. My goal level was 60 by the time I'm facing Lance to make him as easy as possible, but I don't actually need to fight this Fisher. I would still make it to 60 even if I just removed him from the playthrough. I'm 2 levels higher this time for Blaine, which is perfect because it increases my chance to knock out the Ninetales in 1 turn. So it doesn't hit me with Flamethrower, making this entire battle so much easier. Then it hits me with Fire Blast, doing so much. And it also set up Reflect, minimizing the damage of my physical moves. You can see this in the effective powers in the top left. They are all cut in half now. I haven't been hit enough times to make Rage Fist a viable choice here, so I'm gonna have to use Dig again and just hope I don't get a critical hit. Luckily though, the Arcanine chooses Reflect again and I knock it out. Sabrina does have a chance of defeating me. Remember when I survived on 4 hit points? That was luck. The Alakazam's damage ranges with a regular hit are between 93 and 110% damage when using Psychic. If it crits, it will always one-shot Annihilape. Thing is, Sabrina in Yellow version does not have good AI, so she just spams random moves, and sometimes she chooses Psywave, one of the worst moves in the game. That's what happens here, and once I defeat her, I am now 5 minutes and 20 seconds ahead of my previous pace. This second run is going really well, and it is brought to you by Guard Spec. I get a little bit fancy against the rival. I use Dig so that he'll hopefully choose Poison Sting against me, increasing the damage of Rage Fist, which is what happens. Then I have to get lucky against the Execute. It chooses Solar Beam, so I do, and then I can use Rage Fist on the Cloyster, although it lowers my attack stat with Aurora Beam, similar to what happened during Rival 5 with my first playthrough. Still, Dig is so good against the final Pokemon that it doesn't end up mattering. Okay, Lorelei is fairly straightforward. I can use Dig to dodge its first turn attack, then once it uses Rest, I can use Low Kick twice to knock it out. Cloyster gives me a chance to get hit by Clamp to stack up Rage Fist's power, but it just doesn't go for it, and she spams a bunch of Super Potions, and I also inflict flinches. For the Slowbro, I hope to dodge Psychics, and I do, with the Slowbro only choosing the move when I'm underground, and then it chooses Amnesia until I knock it out. There are 2 more ways that I can still lose this fight. Both are very unlikely. The first one is that Jinx can freeze me with Ice Punch, but it doesn't, so I move on to the Lapras. This is the second place I can lose. Because of my typing, it is going to spam Confuse Ray against me, and potentially confuse me, and then Annihilape could knock itself out with self-inflicted damage, but of course that's really unlikely, and of course it doesn't end up happening. Just to save a tiny bit of time, I end up teaching Earthquake over Dig just before the Hiker so I can one-shot the Onix. Following that, after I take care of Agatha, my Annihilape is level 55. This is so I can use my 5 remaining rare candies to level up to 60 before I take on Lance. Let's go through the damage ranges here. At level 55, Rock Slide has a 15.8% chance to one-hit the Gyarados. It's more likely to 2-hit with an 84.2% chance. On both of the Dragonairs, I do not have one-hits unless I'm using Rage Fist after stacking up its power. Earthquake only has a 17.6% chance to get the job done. And then once I reach the Aerodactyl, which has flying type moves, I need to 2-hit using Rock Slide. Beyond that, things get worse because at Dragonite, my 2-hit with Rock Slide is only a 75% chance. Even at level 60, my damage ranges are much better. I have a slightly better chance against the Aerodactyl and the Dragonite, but it's still not good enough. So instead, I am going to low kick the Gyarados and get hit by moves, increasing the power of Rage Fist. By getting hit twice, I am able to one-shot it, as well as the following 2 Dragonairs. I am left in a rough position here against the Aerodactyl. My optimization of the run did not give me enough speed to move first against the Aerodactyl, which might be an oversight. Purchasing Carbos in Celadon City would just be better so that I could move first here. Luckily for me, the Aerodactyl chooses Wing Attack here, which I shrug off and knock it out with Rage Fist. Beyond that, the Dragonite is now a one-hit, and I've made it back to the champion. For this battle, I'm using the same moveset that I did before. Rest gives me insurance against the Executor, and from there I sweep to a dominant victory. Annihilape clocks in with a final time of 42 minutes and 53 seconds, with 0 resets, 0 blackouts at level 62, with a game time of 2 hours and 50 minutes. This is 6 minutes and 27 seconds faster than my former result. Before we rank Annihilape, I'm going to go through the Professor Oak fight. This is a secret fight that's on the ROM. It was never actually included in the game, but you can access it through glitches. I like to do it after all my yellow runs, just for a little bit of fun. Also, thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships. It really means the world to me. At the beginning of the fight, I have to face a Tauros with only normal moves, so it's free even though Earthquake takes 3 hits to knock it out. The Executor is very similar to the champions, but this one doesn't have Leech Seed. This also tends to be the Pokemon that is best to steal a move from using Mimic, so I'm going to take Stomp in this case. I don't think I'll need Hypnosis. His Grass type tries to use the Psychic type move on me, but luckily this time he just keeps missing until eventually he does put me to sleep. That said, without Leech Seed it can't do damage, so this is just wasting time, and I don't care about that because I've already clocked in. Earthquake almost manages the Arcanine in a single hit, it just barely survives, uses Ember, luckily doesn't burn me, and I move on to the Venusaur. Probably in retrospect it would have been harder to go up against the Charizard team, but I thought Venusaur would still be a little bit difficult because it does like to use Sleep Powder during this fight. It doesn't end up putting my Annihilape to sleep though. I knock it out, and all that's left is Gyarados, which goes down to 2 uses of Thunderbolt. Okay, time for the ranking. So with Annihilape's time of 42 minutes and 53 seconds, it's gonna earn itself a spot in the A tier. It is definitely possible to push this time lower, and maybe I'll do that in the future with a big re-ranking video of all my backports. But for now, I'm trying to keep them to only 2 runs each, just because there are so many Pokemon that I need to complete if I want to do every species. The one comparison with Annihilape that I do want to make is with Gengar. It had a time of 39 minutes and 22 seconds, and it earned itself just barely a spot in the S tier. That said, in order to do this with Gengar, I had to do so many playthroughs, it was absolutely brutal. That ghost relies heavily on the luck from Hypnosis to make it through the playthrough without resets, whereas Annihilape just kind of stomps everything. I think if I put these two head to head in the future, that Annihilape would end up coming out on top on average. Although I think Gengar might get the lowest possible time just because Hypnosis luck can make miracles happen. But I think if each of these Pokemon was restricted to like best of 3 runs, that Annihilape likely would come out on top. And that's just because of its consistency, which was obviously displayed today. Okay, so let's try and find another ghost Pokemon that might rival these two. Well, what about Chandelure from Generation 5? It's a ghost type, it has incredible special attack, and I think in Generation 1 it might just be the best fire type that I've played to date. Tomorrow, we are going to find out. Now, if you've made it this far, you're incredible. I'll see you in my next video.